All right. Well, Brock, welcome to the Untitled Chapter podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to talk to you. We were just chatting a little bit, and I was like, I better just be quiet, just jump in the podcast. I have so many questions for you. So where are you physically located right now?
Mesa, Arizona.
Mesa, Arizona. Is it super hot?
Actually, it's really cold today.
Oh, is it? Well, it is
Yeah, it
winter.
was like 40 degrees this morning.
Oh, well, it is winter, so there's that. Just before
But
Christmas.
but but it's a dry winter.
Yeah, yeah. Well, desert. Yeah, I could see
Yeah.
that. Well, listen, I am so excited to talk to you because I don't often get the opportunity to talk to someone who is former law enforcement. And I know that y'all suffer a lot of PTSD and have a lot of have a lot of issues. And I just cannot wait to hear, your perspective on what it's like to be in that world and what it's like to try to recover from addiction once in that kind of environment. So I can't wait to hear your story. So what I typically do is I'll give you like 10, 15 minutes. You just tell your story uninterrupted, and then I'll pepper you with a bunch of questions afterwards. I have so many questions.
You'll need to interrupt me because that's funny the way you intro us that we have tons of issues, and you are absolutely right. We have issues. You know
Yeah.
what's interesting is I need to tell a little bit of my background. I'm not an addict. I wasn't raised in a home where there was addiction. I was raised in a two-parent home where we were taught right and wrong. There was an enormous amount of discipline in our home through my parents. There was four boys and four girls growing up, so we were a huge family. We were pretty close, but there was almost like a two-part family. The first four were the oldest, and then the younger four, and so there was a division. I grew up learning about um, religion and Christ. So that was taught in my home. So I had a moral compass. I knew right and wrong, and I think later on in my life, that's what my biggest battle ended up being, was that compass. So I tell that just so you understand a little bit of who I am. Well, I served a mission for my church when I was 19 years old. I went to Paraguay, so I was able to learn Spanish, which later helped me tremendously in my career. I got back from my mission, played a year in college football in northern Arizona or in eastern Arizona, and then I tested for the Mesa Police Department. And so what's interesting was most people don't know, and I didn't even know at the time, but my dad was a police officer early in his life. And he was a Mesa police officer too. And the only reason I found it is because I was snooping in his closet and I went through the back and I saw this bag and it was covering these clothes. So of course, I'm in his room, so I was being super sneaky. But he had a police uniform, and I'm a little kid, like 5, 6 years old, and I pulled it out and I'm looking at this thing and it was gorgeous.
His
You
superhero
know,
costume?
Yes, it was, and I would slip that thing on every now and again, run around the house, and but I remember seeing the badge on it and the hat and everything. I was like, man, I just want to be a police officer. So, early in your life when they say, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? I wanted to be a police officer, right? I just
Yeah.
always did. So it kind of stuck with me. So when I had the opportunity to test, I did it. I
Oh,
tested amongst 500 people, you know and for me that was kind of a stress because here I'm in like flip-flops, shorts, and a t-shirt showing up for the test, right? Because it was a written test. You're just going to go, they're going to give you a bubble sheet, you're going to go fill it out, and then if you pass, then you move through the process. But I get there and all these guys, there was like 500 people there, and these dudes are in like shiny military boots. Their pants were bloused. Their shirts were creased. They looked. I'm looking at them like, okay, I got no shot, no shot. But I'm gonna do this anyways, you know, because I'm here. I might as well do it. Well, long story short, I tested. I did really well on the test. They moved me along, and I'm a pretty physically fit guy. That's what I was raised. We played college football. My brother's a coach in the NFL. My dad was a high school football coach. So yeah, we came from it in our family. So of course the testing, the physical testing, the mental testing. I did really well and excelled at it. And I get in 1997, they called me up, and that tells you how old I am. They called me up and said, "Hey, we would like to offer you a position in the Mesa Police Department." And I remember I was just so elated. You know, I'm thinking to myself, I got a career, you know,
How old were
and
you when you they
uh,
invited?
I think I was 20. I was 22, 23 years old.
Oof, young.
I was a youngster, yeah, and my life was. I mean, luckily I lived those 2 years in South America, so I had seen some. I
Uh,
lived by myself. I learned how to wash my own clothes, how to cook my own food. Mom wasn't there, so that was a huge blessing
yeah.
in my life. But I was naive. I was super naive to the world, you know? And so I
Yes,
got
I
on the
do.
police department and I flourished in drug deals, in drug stings. And it became kind of my niche in a way. I loved arresting addicts.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, and this is really kind of an important element in my story because it was what I never wanted to become,
Oh yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I so much so that I developed kind of a disdain for them because when you go house after house and you see the destruction that it's causing, you pick up a dead body from a motor vehicle accident where drugs and alcohol were involved. You kind of just get you become hard,
Yeah.
and you become cynical. And you're like, you kind of grow this mentality that it's us against them, we're better than them. And it was really hard for me, working these kind of cases, but I loved it. And my goal was to become an undercover cop. That is what I wanted to do. I hated doing traffic accidents. I didn't like robbery. I didn't like home invasion. I didn't like any of that stuff. I didn't like homicide. I didn't want to do any of those special units, but I wanted to work undercover. And looking back and kind of analyzing myself, I wanted it because I wanted to change who I was, if
Mm.
that makes any sense. I wanted to live
Yeah.
a different life because I was so clean cut. I grew up with so many rules and regulations and standards that living a little bit looser in a way was kind of a different personality. Does that make sense?
I understand.
Yeah, so I was very much drawn to it. I spoke fluent Spanish, so that really helped me
I'm so
elevate
jealous.
my career. Yeah, I mean, how many white dudes like me speak fluent Spanish,
I'm half Mexican. I do not speak fluent Spanish.
right? And it was a blessing. Like on the streets, people they would look at me, okay, and then they would turn around and start speaking Spanish. And no way in heck do I know how to speak Spanish, right? That's what they were thinking.
I love that.
Yeah, and so we were able to develop a lot of intel. I was able to listen to conversations, and it was a benefit. And so when the opportunity arose, I put in for this undercover position, and I got it. I worked on a team that was called the Scat Team. It was a special crimes apprehension team, and our modality or our yeah, scat, right?
I
Think about
know.
a piece of
Sorry.
poop, right? Yeah, that's what
Did you see
most
the look
people.
on my face? I'm like,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah,
doesn't that mean? Okay,
yeah. It
got
does.
it.
Um, but what was cool was we were a team of like 8 guys, 7, 8 guys, and each one had a different kind of niche, right?
Hmm.
And one of mine is I wanted to be the undercover officer. I wanted to be
Yeah.
involved, and we were working some pretty big cases, really big cases, and arresting a lot of bad guys, and so it kind of led to this whole different. It led to my demise, if that makes any sense,
Mm.
because I was so enveloped in it, and I had grown such a what do you even call it, like a need for team, like I needed my team
Like a
and
community or
community. Yeah, we talk about that in recovery, that you need people.
yeah, you need a
And I
boss. Yeah.
had I had a team of guys that were phenomenal. They would risk their life
Hmm.
to protect me.
Literally.
And yeah, and I would for them because that's just what you do. And I started noticing that my home life became boring.
Mm.
5 kids, my
Adrenaline
wife.
junkie.
Yeah, and then I
You were
come
married
home,
already?
was married. Yeah, and I'd come home and I was like, this sucks. This is kind of boring. and I was just waiting for my pager to go off. Again, I
Oh.
just aged myself, right? And,
Pager.
yeah, waiting for the pager to go off. Okay, I gotta go. I gotta
Stop saying
go.
that.
And
I'm older than you.
yeah, but you had a pager too, and
I did.
and yeah, in that kind of. But there was a turning point, and if you don't mind, I'll share this because there's a couple stories that I have that really
Please.
make sense to me. It was December 27th, 2 days after Christmas, and we were doing a DUI task force. You know how the motor officers, you see them arresting people for drinking and driving, and I was just working that night. And on the other side of town, Mesa's a big place. Mesa's a huge community, and some officers tried to pull over a car on the freeway, and a pursuit ensued. And so this guy took him eastbound on US 60, and it was like a 27-mile pursuit. And he went east and then kind of looped back around. And when he looped back around, there are officers that are specialized in certain pieces of equipment, right? For example, like the canine officers, they have to
Oh,
go
sure.
through specific training to I can't just be a canine handler. I have to go through the training. Well, they were calling for certified AR-15 shooters, and I was certified in kind of a rifle.
Mm-hmm.
And there was one of three of us that were on that night, and I'm like, hey, I'm available. And obviously, they were thinking that it was going to end up into a shooting by the way the guy was acting, the way he was calling dispatch. He was saying he had a firearm, and he was trying to shoot out the helicopter above us. That's what he was saying. It got kind of volatile. But he ended up coming back into town and didn't know the area, obviously, and he looped himself around in a neighborhood and got stuck in a cul-de-sac.
Oh my God.
So when he turns around, we come up as officers and we make a felony traffic stop. So his car's in front, and then the three of us kind of block him in, and now we're nose to nose in a traffic stop, right? You've seen that on
Yeah,
TV.
I have.
Yeah. And so I remember, and I should back up, and I don't tell this story very often. I think this is the first time I've ever told it on a podcast. So yeah,
Thank
what
you.
was interesting was on my way, when I said, hey, I'll be en route, and I turned my car around, I actually had a premonition in my head, like, hey, Brock, you're going to be in a shooting tonight. Stop your car and get your rifle ready. So, and if a lot of officers will hear this and be like, oh, I get it, because when we carry these specialty rifles, we carry them in our trunk. They were called patrol ready. So they were in our trunk, they were in a case, which is kind of weird because you think about, you want it available, you want it ready right now.
Is it
Kind of like the
biometric or is it keys?
oh, it's just you just flip it open. But
Oh,
a lot of police cars, they have the shotgun in the middle. You've seen that like
right.
the
Yeah.
old movies, yeah. Well, the ARs are in the trunk, which is
Oh, shit.
always weird
Doesn't
for
make
me.
any sense. Yeah.
Doesn't make any sense. But I stopped the car and I listened to this premonition. I'm like, oh, if someone's talking to me and it's that clear, I need to do what he says,
Wow.
right? So I pull over, open my trunk, open the case, grab my AR, look down, make sure it's got a round
Mag.
in it, and I walked it up in the front seat and I stuck it in the center console, which was
Is that
a
a
violation of
no,
policy.
no?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because it's supposed to
Yeah.
be in your trunk, but
Yeah.
someone's
Yeah.
telling me, hey, you're going to get into shooting tonight.
You heard a voice.
I heard a voice. Yeah. So and I have not told people that, which is
Okay.
kind of, yeah. So I go down the street and it's about 5 miles and I turn in and I'm the first car and I'm nose to nose with the guy. So he stops, I'm in front of him and two fan out and they park next to me. So the guy's sitting in his truck, and as officers, we did everything 100% correct, right? We knew he was intoxicated, possibly under the influence of drugs. There was 20, 50, there were so many officers on scene because it had taken so long to get there. And I had positioned myself in my front seat with my door open with my rifle in the little slot between the door and the hood,
Oh,
right?
uh-huh.
It's kind of wedged in there. I'm just sitting in my seat and I'm looking down at the guy. And he gets out of his truck, and I believe he had a knife in his hand, but he wasn't threatening. He wasn't coming at anybody. He was just standing there. And so, of course, we as police officers did everything we could. But now you got to think about it. We're in a cul-de-sac, so there's 2 homes here, 2 homes here, and so you're kind of stuck by home. So
Is
if
this
you're
at night?
at night, yeah.
That
And so,
people are sleeping inside their homes?
well, no, no, no. They knew about it now because everybody's outside. They're watching
Oh,
us. I
it's
mean,
loud. Oh,
yeah.
shoot.
And we're creating and it's 2 days after Christmas,
All right.
right?
Yeah, everyone's
I
home.
mean, in a very nice community.
Okay.
And I remember him getting out of the truck, and we beanbagged him. We hit him twice in the like the kidneys with beanbags, and it had no effect on him. He
Because
just
he was
stood there.
high.
Yeah, and then we shot him with we tasered him.
Okay.
No effect.
Oh, really?
The canine went and bit him in the leg and was pulling. But what happens if you know much about canines, if you don't fight, the canine releases.
Oh, you're right. They
Well, if you're
do?
struggling, well, they keep fighting. So the
Okay.
guy didn't fight. It bit him in the leg. He took the canine, went back to his handler. The handler's like, no, go back. So it bit him again. So 2 times this guy was bit. We tried to pepper spray him, but the guy that was in charge of this big pepper spray gun that had this like canister on it, he didn't
Hose?
charge it. He didn't charge it. So it went, yeah, which was kind of like anticlimactic,
Wah,
you know? It's
wah.
like, oh, exactly. We're like, oh, that's not supposed to happen. He'll hear about that.
Yeah.
So we did everything possible. He got back into his truck, put the thing in drive, and gunned it at us. Well, where I was at, I had a bunch of officers that were taking caution behind my vehicle,
Oh,
and had
shoot.
he hit my car, of course, it would have pushed the car and it would have caused major accident. So I shot 2 rounds through the windshield at him, and they killed him. Okay,
Mm.
December 27th, and I remember they pulled him out of the ground, and I have to admit, I was angry. You know,
Mm.
I'm like, who
You
is
didn't
this
want
guy?
to?
Well, nobody wants to. Nobody wants to kill
Of course
somebody,
not. Yeah,
you
of
know.
course not.
But I was angry because I'm thinking, damn, this guy was drunk. It's December 27th. Why didn't he just stop? Why is he putting us through this? Now I got to live with this crap. And
Mm.
I just my mental component just went skyrocket.
Yeah.
Now, fast forward about 2, 3 months, we're in a deposition. His mom, his dad, his sister, their attorney, my attorney, and me are in a room, and we're going through this scenario. Okay. And they're asking every single question, kind of like you did. Hey, what time of night was it? How many officers were there? Did you guys give verbal commands? And the whole thing. But when it was done, the mom said, "Hey, Brock, can I ask you a question?" And of course, I'm a dad, and I'm a parent too, and
Oh,
I
dear
want
God.
I want to help out. I want to make sure that she has her answers. But I wasn't expecting this question, so I made sure that I answered it correctly. And she looked at me in the eyes and says, "If you had a chance to do it again, would you kill my son?"
Mm.
So, and in my eyes, I didn't I didn't put it I didn't equate it as a killing. Does that make sure? I don't feel. I mean, I did end his life, but it wasn't something malicious with malicious intent. I was doing my job, but I made sure I sat there for a second because that's a hard question to
Yeah.
digest, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And so she asked me, would you kill my son? And I looked at her, and after thinking about it, I'm like, I would have to, as an officer, that's how we're trained. My job was to protect the other officers who were on scene. And unfortunately, at that moment, your son wasn't in his right mind, you know? And
Mm.
leaving that deposition kind of opened my eyes a little bit. I'm like, well, then where was his mind? Why was he so out of it and so willing to die?
Right.
What was going on in his life that was such a frustration? Why was he so this was his 4th DUI. He would have had another DUI. This was mandatory prison time, probably. I mean, he was facing some time. So I understand that fear was in there. And so that really stuck with me, because I'm a clean cut kid. I'm doing my job. I'm hustling. I'm doing everything I can. And then you have to take someone's life.
You're in your 20s at this point?
Yeah. Now fast forward it to early February of 2001. So like 3 months later. And this kind of was my demise in my like the start of my addiction. Was we were working an undercover sting type thing, and I was running a confidential informant in this area, and one of the ladies we were using was a prostitute. And the prostitutes know everything, right? They're like ground zero to knowing where all the drugs are at, who's committing the crimes, and everything. And she had a warrant for her arrest, and she says, "Hey, officers, if you don't arrest me today, can I tell you about an involvement in a drug deal that's about to go down that you guys are going to want to be aware of?" And we're like, "Yeah, tell us." She was right across the street where we were at. There's going to be a white F-150 show up. It's going to be driven by a lady and her daughter. Her daughter's 12 years old, and she's going to prostitute her daughter in exchange for drugs. So when she pulls in, a drug dealer is going to basically, I'm telling you, and so you understand it, a dealer is going to come to the passenger side, and exchange is going to happen. Mom's going to get drugs. The dealer's going to get the daughter. Okay. Now, who in their right mind wouldn't take that opportunity up? Okay, you can walk today. We're going to sit on this. And within minutes, that truck shows up.
Wow.
Okay. The guy on the dealer on the bike comes up, just like she says, pulls up to the passenger side, starts talking to the girl. And then at that point in time, we're like, if we have enough probable cause, at least to get involved, we're going to approach. So we get to the vehicle. I contacted the driver, who's a female. Passenger is a female, young female, the drug dealer. So we handcuff him just to detain him, like he's not under arrest. We sit him down on the curb so we can kind of investigate so he can't leave. And mom, the driver, is acting like she's a victim. Hey, this guy just came up to us and wants my daughter for sex, and I don't know what's going on. I just came here to wash my clothes, because there was a laundromat right in front. Well, luckily, we had that intel from our confidential informant that said this is a drug deal. Okay. And I remember looking down on her floorboard, because you kind of look around in the vehicle, make sure there's no weapon. And I saw some syringes and a vial. And the vial, it looked like steroids. Oh. Like an oil-based substance, right? Yeah. And I'm like, which is crazy, because after it was actually synthetic methamphetamines, okay? Which most people have never heard of. And I hadn't either. And that was what I did. Right, I had never seen like a water-soluble, oil-soluble methamphetamine. Never seen it. Okay. So that was just kind of a side note, right? And so my partner and I, we switched spots, and so now I'm watching him, and I'm at the back tire, and my partner's at the front of the vehicle, and he starts talking to her. I could tell something's going on. She's getting upset. He's like, "Can I have your ID?" And she's like, "F this." She throws her truck into reverse. Turns her vehicle like that, which we made a mistake. I made a mistake initially by not having her turn her truck off. I got to admit that. Why didn't have her turn the damn truck off? Like, why, But she reverses back, catches his left foot under the tire. He falls and runs over his back, right? And I'm in the back right tire, and when she drives backwards, she rolls over my right foot. So I'm like, you feel that pain. So I went to pull it out, and my foot was still under there, and I broke my bone in my foot. And then I'm like, okay, that hurt. So I went to step and get my control, my left foot down, and then she ran right over my leg. So you remember the Stretch Armstrong toys?
Oh, yeah.
That's what my knee looked like. It just hit the ground and bounced back up. Ugh. And I'm thinking, man, that hurt, right? And but the adrenaline, like if someone's been through this situation, they understand like that adrenaline, it just takes over everything. Yeah. She reverses back. I see him on the ground. I'm trying to get up, and she gets stuck on a median. Like her car gets wedged. I'm like, how does that happen? But thank you, right? I'm all thinking these thoughts will come up.
Isn't it amazing how many thoughts can go through your mind in such a short amount of time?
Yeah, it's so amazing how our mind works. Well, and so we come up and we arrest her. We pull the daughter out, and it's over. But due to the injuries, I have to go get some surgeries, and I go see my doctor. Okay, so this is where and the whole night I'm thinking about this situation. I'm like, who in their right mind will sell their daughter for drugs?
Well, she's not in her right mind. She's on drugs.
Right. But at the time, I still didn't understand this. I just shot a guy that was under the influence, and now her, and now this like dilemma's hitting me in the head, right? And so I'm going to see my doctor. I'm getting fixed. I'm in rehab, and I remember my doctor saying, "Hey, Brock,
Physical rehab.
physical rehab from the surgeries." And my doctor, who became my friend because I'd had so many surgeries, tells me, "Hey, Brock, you're never going to get addicted to these pills because you're a cop." And
A
of course, at that time,
doctor.
yeah, my doctor, yeah. And in my mind, I'm like, okay, cool, right, I get it, because I'm a cop. I'm not going to get addicted to
A
these things.
doctor told you that.
Yeah, he did. Now
Oh,
that was, but that was bad advice, right? That was,
yeah, it's not
I
even
didn't.
true.
It's not true, and I didn't know this, so I'm thinking,
I'm sorry. Have you gone back to this doctor to correct him?
he's actually retired now.
Thank
He's
God.
retired. Yeah, right. He was a great surgeon. I'm just gonna say that, and he was a good man.
Okay.
And I think he was just saying it more for like, hey, don't worry about it. You're gonna be okay.
All right.
Right?
Whatever.
So, but here's where it happens. Here's
Okay.
where everything starts already.
Hmm.
So I because of the injuries, the police department has to retire me. So I have to medically retire from being an officer. And that right there in itself was probably the biggest blow that I've ever had in my life. Because you go from being somebody important,
Mm.
right? Any party, any family function, any church event, people would come up and say, "Hey, dude," and they knew what I did. I mean, I had long hair, earrings, goatee. I was working undercover, and everybody wanted to sit and just, "Hey, what's your stories?" Those who knew what I did were, and you were intriguing, you were important, you were
Mm.
somebody. And
Mm.
now you
You
get
know.
retired, and the hard part I remember was after they retired me, they said, "Hey, tomorrow, can you come turn in your keys? Can you turn in a bunch of your equipment?" Like, because it wasn't mine, right? I got to turn it back in. But I turned it in and I walked away, and I'm like,
Who am I?
this sucks. Yeah, because now if I want to go back and visit those guys, my team, I got to go through the front desk. I got to sit in a waiting room and wait for those guys. I don't have access anymore through the codes to get to the back. My key fobs are gone. I mean, does that make sense?
Oh
And
yeah, yeah.
so I'm sitting home just stewing like, man, and then thinking, hey, what are they doing today? What kind of drug arrest are they on? I mean, we were doing some crazy stuff. So my mind was still there, but my body wasn't. And they retired
Yeah.
me because I was a liability. And can I jump over a fence? Can I land? Can I get in a fight? Can I do those things? And so in my mind, I still think I can. So I started self-medicating myself,
Hmm.
for the
Because you still have
depression.
medication. You still have medication from your surgery.
Oh, yeah, for a long time. Yeah, I took meds and meds, and I started self-medicating, and that kind of made me feel better. But then I started being someone I wasn't, right?
Yeah.
And I ended up getting divorced over it. My kids, I have 5 kids at the time. Mom took off with them up north, and I was not the guy I was supposed to be.
Why did she feel the need to leave?
Because I was my well, the important part to understand is I went through a massive depression.
Okay.
I was seeking things that were inappropriate in a relationship. I was
Okay.
seeking other relationships. I
Okay.
was trying to
Which
put
is
my,
pretty common actually for men
ah,
in law enforcement.
yeah, mine was just, I was sad. Does that make sense? And I wanted someone to fill the void. I mean, I knew that my wife understood, but she
Hmm.
didn't understand. Like, she couldn't take that pain away. So I wanted to fix that pain
You needed a
through
distraction.
through pictures and just like the secretness of developing relationship. I mean, I was sick. I
So
was sick.
we're talking sex addiction.
Sex addiction just went through the roof. Yeah,
Got it. Yeah.
my opiate
Okay.
addiction was getting out of control,
They
and
typically go hand in hand.
there's some type of replacement when you're trying to get off one, something else picks up. I mean,
Yeah.
think about people who are overweight and they want to start a diet. They start putting all their time and energy in the gym,
Yeah.
right? It's just a replacement. It's what
Yeah.
we do.
A
And for
sufficient
me,
substitute, as they
yeah, a
say in the
sufficient.
rooms.
For me, it was not a sufficient substitute. It was actually another addiction.
Yeah.
And but my thing was my mind was racing a million miles an hour, and I needed it to be filled because I was I was unhealthy,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so that was kind of a big thing when I lost my
So
family.
she discovered what was happening and obviously couldn't live with that, so she left.
Discovered the sex addiction,
Yeah.
and I think she had known it for a long time,
We
but she
always know.
never, yeah, she
We always know.
never knew about the opiate addiction because remember now, I worked undercover. I knew how to talk. I could
Yeah.
hide it. I masked it. I knew what to say.
Yeah.
I knew the signs and all of that. And so nobody knew.
So opiate addiction is a little bit easier to hide than like alcohol. Like you are drunk, everybody knows it,
Yes.
right? But pills are a little bit different because they're easier to hide for a variety. You don't smell it, you don't lose control of your behavior like when you're on alcohol. Is that I mean, I
Yeah.
don't have I didn't have an opiate addiction, but that's
And for me, it was I wasn't like I wasn't your common user where I was having to go chase it on a daily basis on the streets, and I had to go to dark alleys. I had to go find a dealer. I had it. My doctor was my
your
dealer.
doctor, your
Yeah,
dealer. Yeah.
and honestly, I had so many pills that I had a buddy, one of my best friends. Him and I kind of made an agreement, and I would give him my extra pills. He would take them down and sell them and bring me the money for them. So what I absolutely despised,
Oh
I
my
had
God.
become,
Yeah.
right? I become now I'm this dealer that's dealing his opiates. But I had so many pills because I had a foot injury, a knee injury, and a hand injury. So I had three different doctors. They didn't communicate with each other. They didn't know how many wanted to give me. So I'm home just banking opiates. And that's how my addiction fueled.
How long after you started taking them do you feel like you became addicted?
Once I retired, once I that sadness, so within a couple of years, I was fully blown addicted to them.
So it took a couple years for you to become addicted?
Well, that I noticed it
Oh,
because I was taking them medically at first, right? Well, you have a
as
surgery, take you
prescribed?
as prescribed, right? Well, you never take them as prescribed, and I never did. I would always add a couple more, you know what I'm saying? But
Uh-huh.
my pain was gone, and now this is where I knew my addiction started. Is I started kind of playing the doctor.
Mm-hmm.
I would go in one time, hey doc, this it's not killing the pain anymore, man. Can you bump it up a little bit? Or and then I go to the next doctor and say, hey, that's what you gave me last time was a little bit too strong. Can you lower the dose? Because I had known the other doctor just gave me a max, and I didn't want them to catch on,
Oh,
right?
interesting. You're playing a little
So
game.
I was playing a game with all three doctors, telling them, hey, can I need something stronger? I need something, and then they would always oblige. They always did it because here I am, a retired officer. I'm not going to get hooked on that stuff. And my medical charts show numerous surgeries, you know, and so they never found out.
It's really interesting to me that as a doctor, you have a patient that has different, multiple injuries, and they know that they're not treating those other injuries. It doesn't occur to them to do a little cross referencing or ask you, "Are you getting medication from other doctors? We don't want to over medicate you." Like, there's no
Never had it. And this was back in the day before even the now
You feel like there's
your
more awareness now.
there's more awareness, especially with the big pandemic that's going on through Trump. I mean, he made some awareness. He made some big changes in that to where the pharmacies now can communicate with each other. They can see medical treatment, at least prescriptions. So, but nobody knew. They weren't even close to each other, and they were totally different. Like one was a knee doctor, one was a hand. So they didn't even see each other in the hospital, contaminated. Yeah.
I know,
So
but
for
as a
me,
doctor, you look at your patient and you go, "Oh, look, he had surgery on his knee and his foot, and I'm treating his hand." Like they don't even, and like the doctor that told you that you couldn't get addicted. I mean, the ignorance of
total
doctors
ignorance.
that you put
And so
your,
was I, though. You know what I mean? Like,
but it's not
all in
your
all,
job. It's not your
no,
job to be the doctor. It's not your job to know those things.
you're absolutely right. But this is where my ownership comes in. Like, I knew it was happening
Yeah, yeah,
and I allowed it.
You're right. Yeah.
And I felt it spiraling out of control now that my wife's gone,
Yeah.
living alone in an apartment. I have a little bit of money coming in from the retirement, and
And the
it
drug
just
dealing.
and I had some extra cash from the drug dealing, and yeah, and so my life hadn't exploded.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, I wasn't living behind a garbage can or picking from a garbage can. I wasn't
Interesting.
sofa surfing, you know what I'm saying? I was able to maintain it,
Got
but
it.
internally, and the reason I shared the earlier stories was internally, my moral compass was now just spiraling and needed help.
The cognitive dissonance, the
Yeah.
conflicting the conflicting values. Yeah, that's a very painful place to be. How did you end up getting sober?
So my rock bottom, from what I say is, well, I had two rock bottoms. I there was a moment that I took a gun and was thinking about suicide.
Mm-hmm.
I was driving up north to see my kids. My service weapon was in my center console, and I was just sad. I saw my life was out of control, so I took the gun and put it to my head because I knew it was loaded, and I was alone, right, for that moment. And I heard my son speak to me, say, "Hey, Dad, you're not a chump. You're not going out this way." And I'm
Mm-hmm.
looking around, going, "Oh, like we're talking." That's how plain I heard him say that.
You heard a voice.
So that was a moment of rock bottom that I'm like, my kids know what's going on.
You saw, how old was your son at that time?
You know what? I don't even remember. He was pretty young, but him and I are really close. So
Yeah.
I'm seeing it 6, 7, 8, something like that. He's
But
he's now like, yeah.
you
So I
saw
heard his voice.
yourself through your son's eyes, and you were like, what kind of example would I leave for my son if this is how I choose to go out?
Yeah, and I couldn't do it. But
Yeah.
what really happened was I was in my house. I went to my medicine cabinet. I opened it up, and there's all my pills placed perfectly, how many I have in there, etc. And I shut the cabinet, and it shines into my bedroom, and I can see. I'm like, Brock, you live in a crack house. Oh, you live. You're a crack. You're involved in dealing, man. And I looked in there, and I saw this scene a million times as an officer walking into these homes. My home was a disaster. It was disgusting. And I remember this was my biggest mistake of my addiction. And this is where I think people should really hear this out, is I acted in haste. I acted like there was so much anger and fire and fury in me that I opened my cabinet up, grabbed every pill bottle and dumped it in the trash and then flushed it. And then I'm like,
Uh-oh.
oh man, I'm out of pills. I have nothing. I had just refilled from my doctor. Like, well, how do you do? Hey, doc, I just ran out of 390 pills. What do I do? I lost them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that was the moment I'm like, okay, you made the decision. It's time. Like, you were mad about it. You dumped them. You now have to live with it. And so and this is where I really screwed up, is I detoxed alone,
Oh, you could have
100% alone.
died.
Yeah, and I didn't do it right because I didn't taper off. I didn't have any support. I mean, I had minimal food in my house, and I'm in the long haul, 7 days. I'm in my house, in my shower. I mean, defecating on myself, throwing up on myself, peeing myself, turning the shower on when it warm up, and then as soon as it got cold, turn it off. Going through cold chills, freezing cold, throwing up so bad that I really felt like my bones were gonna break. You
Oh
know,
my
when you're
God.
gagging so hard and like you're trying to get something to come up and nothing will, and your body's just so tense, it felt like my backbone was gonna just blow up. And I'm like, I gotta get through this, man. I cannot believe. And I look back at that moment. I'm very blessed that I went through it. Like, I'm glad that it took me there, because I'm so scared to use today because of that pain. And we know it's a progressive disease, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
progressive. Alcohol is a progressive disease. Pills are at progressive disease, which means I'm not going to go back at ground zero. I'm not going to start using one pill at a time. I'm going to go back to where my addiction ended and start
Right.
from there. And so that's why we have so many people dying from opioids, is because they think that when, they have a year sober and they go back and use, they dump so much into their body, it just blows them up.
OD, yeah.
Right. And so that's kind of where I'm glad that I went through it. Um, I had some amazing experiences laying on that floor in the bathroom. And on
Had
the
a few.
seventh day, yeah, on that seventh day, I got up and walked out of there, never using again.
You
And
never
it's
used
been
again after
never
that.
used again. It's been 10 years, almost 11 in January, and I've never used again ever, and I
So
never will.
did you go through, I think we talked earlier, you didn't do 12 step. Did you go to any kind of therapy or treatment after that, or
I went for my sex addiction. I went
okay.
for that, but I didn't go for my drug addiction at the time because it was whooped. It was gone. Does
Hmm.
that and that's at least how I felt in my brain. And I hope people don't hear that and say, "Oh, well, it's like that for everybody." It's not. I was really blessed.
Yeah,
I
you're
was
actually the
really,
exception rather than the rule.
yeah, and
I
I
mean,
do believe that.
in 26 years of recovery, I have not heard this story.
Yeah,
You know what I'm
and
saying? It's
no,
not
you're absolutely right. It's not common,
it's not
and the
common.
men and women that I work with, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
I was done, done.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And
I mean, so there's this interesting phenomenon of like a near death experience, right? Which is kind of what it sounds like. An event so traumatic that it rewires your brain on a certain level,
there
right?
you go.
Yeah. And so there are cases where people do make dramatic changes through something a severe all encompassing like overwhelming events like that. I've seen that. I've seen that happen before. Um, in different scenarios.
Well,
But
it's been 10 years and it still scares me.
yeah, but what's interesting is to hear you say that you got treatment for your sex addiction. And in my mind, it doesn't matter what the problem is. The solution is simple, it's spiritual, and it has nothing to do with the problem. Because the outward, whether it's sex addiction, shopping addiction, drug addiction, alcoholism, these are all things to distract us from our pain. It's their unhealthy coping mechanisms, right? And so you did get treatment for your core issue, which was the sadness and the pain and all the things that you didn't get to resolve, right? That's what makes sense to me, right? You did get treatment. And it doesn't matter what door you walk through the sex addiction door. That's cool. When you were doing that, you were talking about what was the cause, right? They got you. Did you feel like they got you to your root cause of the addiction, like the pain? They helped you process the pain?
No, no.
No.
I feel like I was more aware.
Okay.
That makes sense. And I think that was being awareness, that we talk about three things: awareness, knowledge, and choice.
Okay.
Right? Being aware of it was huge. And now I'm knowledgeable about, hey, you have a sex addiction. You now have a choice how you want to live it. If you want to follow that path or if you want to be morally straight, you have
Mm-hmm.
that decision. So becoming aware was like number one for me, right? But it wasn't until a few years later in my, check this out, like probably 4 or 5 years later, I'm walking through a store. A lady walks by me and she's wearing a lotion, a scent.
Mm.
So you think, about triggers, right? This was an
Right.
external trigger,
Uh-huh.
and it hits me through the nose. And she takes me back to an event that happened in my home when I was 8 years old, where I was sexually molested, right?
Oh, wow.
And that same smell of lotion was being used at that moment. So that correlation was what really was the healing factor for me, is that open. So when you asked if they get to the root of it, no, because that was emotion that was suppressed. I didn't even know about it, right? I had hidden it. I had buried it so deep
Buried it. Yeah.
that when that one trigger hit me, it was like a flood. And I'm sitting there in
Wow.
the store going, oh my gosh. I mean, it took me right back to the event, what the event looked like, what the lighting was like, the candles that were
Wow.
burning, like the seance, the table that was set up. I mean, the whole 9 yards. And I'm like, okay, now I understand why I'm a sex addict. Because at
Right.
8 years
Yeah.
old, you're going through these experiences. that you really didn't even think about. And so that was therapeutic for me.
Just having that memory released from your brain.
100%. And
Ah,
what has actually helped even further is I took it further than I actually text. This person's in prison today, and I actually contacted them and talked to them and said, "Hey, do you remember this event? I'm not mad. I don't harbor any feelings. I mean, I was able to suppress it. Never thought about it for shoot 32 years. So obviously I've handled it. But can we talk about it? Do you remember it? And so we opened up a dialogue, because if I'm hurting from it, she's probably hurting from it. The other
mm,
victim, the other people are probably hurting from it too. So for me, it was super therapeutic.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Getting just acknowledge. There's something about the validation, the acknowledgement that it happened.
That it happened.
It happened.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And it
and it
wasn't my
affected
fault.
you. No, it wasn't your
It
fault.
wasn't my fault. I'm 8 years
No.
old. I don't know. But the way I carried on from that moment was my fault.
I hate to use the word fault, to be perfectly honest. You know what I mean? It's like I was abused, sexually abused by a woman, actually, a female. But what it's like, there's the event and then there's the meaning that we assign to it. It's what happened in my mind that like I assigned meaning. Was that my fault that I assigned that meaning? Like I grew up in the church. And so there was a lot of these ideas of, you know, perfectionism and
Sure.
being guilty, fundamentally guilty. Um, but it's a natural response, right? It's a normal response to being abused is to feel guilty. Like, why did this? Like, it must be me. I must have done something. It must be my fault, right? The
Right.
guilt, right? So, but that's a normal response.
I believe in my head it fits because it kept happening, and I allowed it to keep happening. I kept showing up for it.
Yes, but a child is not able to have boundaries and they are not able to articulate or handle the emotional after effect. That's why there is an age of consent, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So
Absolutely.
you were never guilty. It was never your fault. But we do blame ourselves. And I don't mean to be like, I just feel very strongly about this because I went through it myself, right? For years I've had to overcome this idea that I'm bad, I'm wrong, it was my fault, all that stuff. But I know now that that was not the case. A child at 8 years old is not able to give consent. But it's a funny thing though, because it's like a light switch. Once you
Right.
flip it on, like sexuality is like a light switch. Once you flip it on, there's no turning it off.
So you can't, and at 8 years old, how do you have a normal relationship after that? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like you
Yeah.
you know things that no other 8-year-old should be know. You should know.
It's a sense of power and control and release, and it's all the things. It's all the things. It's all the things, but it also has a price tag of the guilt and the shame, and it must mean that I'm a bad person.
That right there makes sense because, and thank you for the therapy session, by the way.
Sorry.
I
Yeah, I was
needed
like,
to.
you are
No, this is
not
good.
you
I'm
are
not
not
getting
at
off the.
fault. My mama
But
bear came out and I saw you as a
right,
little. I have two boys, right? It's
I,
not your fault.
it's not. But uh, I I understand now a lot more.
Yeah.
Um, it feels I never felt worthy. How about that? I never
Oh
felt
yeah.
like, so as I progressed in the church and you start getting more responsibilities and more powers and more obligations, I always felt dirty. I always felt,
Mm-hmm.
man, do I want this? Do I want this rite of passage? Because are you are you clean enough to receive it? And
Yeah.
so for me mentally, that was always really hard. And that's one of the reasons I served in missions, is because I'm like, it was almost like I need to pay back
Yeah.
for those events, and I need to make it right.
I need to absolve my guilt.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so in my, like, we in our own heads, it makes sense.
Of
Right?
course, of course. And what's funny though, Brock, is the main message of church that I did not get. I tried really hard to get that was the whole purpose of Jesus, right? He came to forget. But there is this. common experience among humans all over the planet, no matter socioeconomic, religious background, whatever, this feeling of guilt, right? And it's just it's part of the human experience. And I missed the message that I was not guilty. Like
Yes.
you were just talking about, it was my fault. You're still not guilty. You're not guilty,
Right.
right? It's like that. Do you ever see Good Will Hunting?
Oh yeah.
Oh, it's not your fault. Oh, please. I crumple every time I watch that because we all have that experience of,
Yeah.
I feel so guilty. And that is the thing that blocks us from receiving sometimes recovery. Like I work
Yeah.
with a lot of women who have some major self-esteem issues. They can't even receive the solution because they feel so guilty. So that's a very common experience, trying to absolve that guilt. And let me ask you, I just want to pivot just a little bit, and please let me know if you're running out of time. But you are a voice for, like, I wonder how this experience that you've been through, how it's changed you. Do you have a new level of empathy for those people who got lost in the drug addiction? Do you now see them differently? And how do you support your brothers in law enforcement, brothers and sisters in law enforcement? Like I know in that community there's not a lot of, there's this idea that you have to hold your mud, you got to be strong. Listen, I'm sure you could describe it way better, but that's the sense I get, that there is not a lot of room for feelings, like having a
If you
feeling.
think there's anonymity in AA, try going into the police department and talking about addiction.
Yeah.
And it's rampant. It's a serious involvement in the police department, but nobody will talk about it. And I
Can you
and
can you help so currently today, like right here today, if somebody in law enforcement hears you, can they reach out to you and work with you anonymously?
Absolutely, and that's really what I do is I do one-on-one coaching
Yeah.
and the reason I did that is there was experiences that I had in the police department where let's say you'd go and see a suicide,
Okay.
right? And you would go in the house and there was blood and you I don't want to describe it, but it's a major scene, right? And you're hearing the families cry and the effects
Mm.
of this and that you have to help move the body and you have to move the
Oh,
gun or whatever it is and it's just not it's a gritty
horrible,
scene. Yeah.
horrible.
And then you go back, okay, and in briefing the next day, your sergeant's like, hey, did anybody experience anything yesterday? How's everything going? And were you affected by it? Because they know what your experience is. Hey, I know you went to that suicide, that gunshot. How are you doing today? I'm fine.
But they're asking you this in a room full of other people.
Yeah, yeah.
So
And
it's
the
not
last
exactly a
thing,
safe environment.
not in the last, because I've heard people say, man, I'm really struggling. And you know what? The first thing, oh, come on, man, you pussy, you're tougher than
Oh,
that. Yeah. And so because we have to hold our water, we have to be like bigger than that. But my thing is how do you go from a molestation to a traffic accident to a homicide scene to a death notification and be okay? You're not okay. And so I understand where addiction rises, like why people go home and they drink because they want to forget those feelings. Because I have nobody to talk to. I would never tell my wife anything. I come home, hey, she'd be like, hey, how was your day? It was okay. It was a good day. Or she goes, well, tell me something. What happened? So you give her a scene like a really basic traffic accident, but you're not going to talk to her because you don't want her carrying those same thoughts,
oh,
those
you don't
same
want her to
pictures.
carry it.
You don't want her to carry it. So you're carrying it. And then even in the briefings. And so that's what I'm trying to share. I'm like,
Yeah.
listen, man, you got to talk about it. I mean, there were scenes with like PTSD that it affects people so differently,
Yeah.
right? I remember that I had two scenes that I try to talk about. It was during school. I was a school resource officer. Two girls left school. They were flying down the street. They came into a head-on collision with a car. Two of them in the car. One of them couldn't get out. She burned to death. We were able to get the other
Oh,
girl out, right? And you would think, seeing all that fire and that smell, and you would think that's a post-traumatic stress, right?
right. That
It wasn't.
qualifies.
It wasn't. that was a normal occurrence, right? That was just part of the job. Now let's fast forward where a husband is in his house and he rolls over on a baby. The baby's face down. He was using meth. He rolls over. He doesn't know it. The baby's face down. He ends up killing the baby, right? Mom comes home. Where's the baby? Rolls dad over, right? The baby's face down, but it's still warm. So mom's like, the
Dad's
baby's alive.
body.
So dad scoops the baby, runs outside. He's calling the police. We're circling. He doesn't even know what his damn address is, right? We finally get there. I'm the first one on scene. He gives me the baby. I look down and I had just had a young daughter,
Oh
right?
my God.
And so when I looked at the baby, there's my daughter Cabri's face in this baby that's not breathing. So I put the baby down and I'm just emotional. I'm a wreck. I'm crying, you know, but I can't let anybody see this. I'm down there. I'm trying to do CPR until the fire department comes, right? Looking at my daughter because it was psychological. It was just a mental hook that happened. That's PTSD. And that's what people don't understand. Like that fire, that should have been such a traumatic event in my life. There was zero connection. There was zero correlation, right? I didn't know the people.
Right.
But because I was able to see this as my daughter, man, it would wake me up at night.
Oof.
And so those are the kind of things that I want to help people with.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
I get it. I understand what you're going through. I understand why you're drinking. I understand why you're hurting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I remember being in that shooting. Before I got cleared for duty, I had to go see a psychologist. And I sat down with him. The first question he asked me is, how you doing? I'm like thinking in my head, how the hell do you think I'm doing? I just killed a guy, right? Like that's not the question that you open up with. Right.
Right.
Yeah. And so in my head, I'm just like, and I asked him, have you ever shot somebody? He's like, no. And I'm thinking, well, this guy has no clue what I'm going
Mm.
through,
Yeah.
you know, and I understand that he knows what it feels like to be in pain.
There
I
is
know
there is
that.
something different
Yeah.
talking to somebody who's been through what you've been through, which is the value of going to like specific
Yes,
like, you know, there's a 12-step meaning for everything, right? And there is value
there is.
in hearing somebody who's been through exactly what you've been through.
Yes. So that's
Yeah.
how I work with men and women is kind of like what you're doing
Yeah. Yeah.
is one-on-one coaching.
Yeah.
I wanted to get out of the big groups because you don't get that connection.
Mm-mm. But I find value in both, to be honest. Maybe smaller groups, but
Yeah.
there is a value in group because then you hear a variety of stories that might trigger something in your brain. But one-on-one that's where it's safe, and I feel like if you create trust, you know, an atmosphere of trust, then people can go through their stuff faster. Um, so let me ask you though, because you mentioned, you know, having PTSD. What types of therapies or what modalities helped you to recover or process those feelings?
Recreational therapy. For me, that's probably the best thing that I've utilized. It's getting outside of myself. And I didn't do very good in the group setting. I didn't do very good in AA.
Uh-huh.
I struggled sitting there and rehashing every day, hey, I'm a recovering addict. I just
Yeah.
felt like I'm past it. I want to be
Right.
past it. I don't want to associate with that every day. So I got myself outside and
Yeah.
I picked up rappelling, I picked up kayaking, and anything that I could get outside and do, it felt super therapeutic. Right?
There is something to be said about being out in nature, number one. But I don't know if you've ever heard of Dr. Andrew Huberman. He's a neuroscientist from Stanford, and he does a lot of, well, he talks about brain chemistry and how we can rewire our brain. And they always talk about, and he has like he can explain the physical mechanics of rewiring your brain through the dopamine reward system. And he always talks about mood follows action,
Mood
right?
follows action. Yes.
We talked about boredom early on before we jumped on the podcast. We talked about boredom early in recovery. And do you feel like the recreational therapy helped? Was that your sufficient substitute?
It was because it gave me the dopamine dump that I needed, just like you
Yeah.
said. You
Yeah.
know, you're hanging off a cliff on a rope. It's like, okay, that's cool. or you're kayaking, that's
Yeah.
good. You go on a hike and you're getting that dump. You're not just sitting
Yeah.
and waiting for bad things to happen.
Right. But you're developing community as well, right?
That's the part. Yeah, I never kayaked alone. I never mountain biked alone. I always went with people. And
Yeah.
just that involvement with other people. Hey,
Mhm.
they're normal. They're not using. I can do this.
I can do this. That's exciting. What other types of therapies have you done, or what else? Like, I love to just like leave like a few solutions for people, especially people early in recovery. Like, if somebody was brand new, what would you suggest they do? Because you did run a rehab, right?
Yeah. There's some steps that I'm a writer. I like writing down a lot.
Hmm.
Some of the things that we have is we share people our story. So we write down our story.
Hmm. Life
And
story.
we
Yeah.
usually, yeah, like our life story, like a 5-page story to where if someone wants to know it, my story is in a place where I can tell it.
Okay.
Right. And I'm not talking about war stories. I'm a big proponent of stop telling your story. Right. Your
Oh,
war stories. I don't
right.
like, that's not what I'm talking about. We're not measuring each other's story, who's bigger and better. But
Right.
but I need to know how to tell my story so it makes sense in my brain.
Right.
So I understand what really happened. And and the reason we do that is, like you said, we run a recovery program. I remember the first week we'd have people tell their story, share their
Hmm.
story. By month 3, that story's changed so much. It's grown and evolved. It's like that wasn't even your story day 1. And now 3 months later, because what they're doing is they're putting so much extra emphasis on these stories. And it's like, listen, man, your story's your story, right? Stop trying to make it bigger than it really is. And because people don't care. People are going
Mm-mm.
through it. They just want to know how you're healing from it, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so that's where a big thing is. So share your story, write down your story. We talk about our 10 most difficult moments. I like to journal those out. What are your 10 most difficult, and what are your 10 best moments, right? Because I want to
Oh,
know what addiction's done to you. Does that make sense?
yes, but I love the idea of the 10 best stories.
Yeah. We always focus on the worst, but I have to understand, like, maybe those 10 stories, one of those, or it's what's keeping me in active addiction.
Right.
Maybe it was the involvement when I was 8 years old. That's a traumatic, but is that keeping me there? I don't know. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to give those stories, and then the best stories that you have, tell me something so we can latch onto those.
Yeah. No, it's so important to focus on the positive so that you can move forward, right? I think like it's so important to acknowledge the past, deal with the past, validate the past, but then we need to balance it out with moving towards the future because I think what's most interesting is this idea of recreating your identity, right?
Oh,
Yeah, we can and I like the best stories because that's evidence that we have assets.
asset. Yes,
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I
And
love that.
and and then the next thing I really like to do is I'm going to give you 5 wins every day. So the first 5 things you're going to do in the morning, you're going to start with the win, right? So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to get up and you're going to make your bed. That's a win right there.
Yes.
It's simple.
Yes.
Make your damn bed, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And so that's one. Now you got to find 4 more things. And so get dressed. Like,
Yeah.
don't lay in bed. Get out of bed. Making your bed. Make sure you get out of bed. Now get dressed and get ready. So that's a win, right? Get to the gym. Show up to the gym. That's 3 wins. Now, once you're in the gym, you have no choice but to work out. That's a win, right?
Oh, so just showing up is a
Just showing
win.
up is a win. Yeah. How many
Got
times
it.
that's the hardest part for me?
Oh,
The
please.
hardest part is getting in my car and driving to the
Yes.
gym.
Yes.
Once I'm there, once I'm
Done.
in that gym, I'm good. I can do
Yeah.
it, right? And so and I'm not talking about just talk about this, but this is written down every day. So we script it. We're
Mm.
big into football. So have you ever heard about every football team out there? They go into a game with their 5 best plays every game.
Ooh,
Okay. So my brother, he's a coach with the Detroit Lions. Okay.
nice.
So what he does is before he starts a game, they work the 5 best plays of the week and they put them in. And so play 1, they run it. Play 2, they run it because they know it's their best.
Got
So
it.
what is your top 5 best things that you're going to do today. Now, tomorrow it might look different. It's Tuesday. I don't want to work out. What are you going to do? Right. So, but you're scripting them and you're writing about them when they happen.
So like journaling, they're journaling this
Journaling.
every day.
Yep.
Yeah, writing.
Every
Oh,
day.
there's
So,
magic in there's. I have a friend who used to say that there's a BS filter in your elbow, and when you write, the truth comes out. There's something magical about the pen, not just typing or text, but actually a physical pen on
writing.
paper. Something
Yes.
magical about that.
Totally agree. So those are kind of some of the tools that we use.
I love it.
Is just now once I got 5 wins in the bank, guess what? Those wins are coming easier.
Yeah.
They're coming easier because I'm starting it off right. But in active addiction, think about it. You didn't want to get out of bed.
No.
You didn't want to get dressed.
No.
You didn't want to get to the gym. You didn't want to eat right.
Mm-mm.
These are all things that you're totally changing bad habits and recreating good habits and good in, good out,
Yeah.
bad in, bad out.
Yeah, that's it. What you're talking about is rewiring your dopamine reward system. I had a doctor on recently who talked about dopamine as the save button, right? And it's like you take an action, then dopamine is released, and then that wires into your brain so that when you feel swirly, your brain remembers, oh, do this thing, and like go to the gym. That made you feel good.
Yes.
It's like the save button. I love that.
I love that. That's
So,
good.
little visualization. No, that's amazing. I feel like I've kept you. I could talk to you forever, and I know that you
Love
have. So maybe we'll have to do another round at some point. But I know you do a ton of. I want to be sure people know how to find you, and I want to give them to reach out to you. So I know you have programs and you do one-on-one coaching, so that's reason enough. And I like the idea that people can work with you anonymously, especially like listen, I had a firefighter on and it's the same environment, right? So firefighters, police
First responders.
officers, first responders, maybe even doctors who, have that same need for protection and anonymity. So they can reach out to you and work with you anonymously and you totally get what they're going through. So I think that's super important. And then you have some other things going on. What's the best way for people to find out all the things that you're doing?
You can go to a lot of it's on my website at www.chasethevase.com. We just did a big summit and we are, Arlena, going to have you on the next one. It's the 2020 recoverysummit.com. They can go on there where they can listen to other experts talking about recovery. I'm a lot like you. Like, I'm good at what I do, but I'm not for everybody.
Oh, no, nobody is for everybody.
Yeah, what you want to do is you want to get as many voices in there because our goal at the end of the day is get sober.
Get sober.
If you like what I teach, and I promise you, it's not easy. Like,
oh, no.
First thing I'm going to tell you is you're full of crap. Own your shit and move on, right? It's a true story. Or you're going to bask in it. Every day you're going to have a reason. Just own it.
Yeah.
Right? It's there. It's yours. There's a reason you have it. Now move on. And people either love that or they hate that.
Is there no little teeny element of validating your feelings and then move on?
Validate your feelings and then move on.
Move
yes.
on.
Yeah.
You don't swear, on. Do you?
I get too emotional when I swear. If I'm swearing, something bad's happening.
Okay, noted.
So my kids have seen me swear. My clients have seen me, but it's a situation where I need to swear.
Okay, I totally get it. Yes.
But seriously, and that's what we're trying to do. And so if my program works, I love it. The Summit's a good place. You can find me on Instagram under Brock Bevell or Chase the Vase. But
what's the story behind Chase the Vase?
It's a story. I tell it on my website on Chase the Vase. You got to go to it and read it.
Okay.
It's a story about a World War I veteran that he was put on a challenge at work, and if he secured the vase, he would get a job. What it is. They wanted to see his attributes. They wanted to see what he was worth, right, and his value. And he was handicapped. He had an addiction, right? He was wounded in battle. So he had to overcome some things that we're overcoming. So our sobriety is our vase. We call it the vase. We're always chasing a trophy, a reward. We're always wanting something. Your vase may be your relationship. It may be sobriety. It may be $1 million. It may be a podcast. Whatever it is, chase it. Like it's
Yeah.
got to be bigger than chasing your addiction, right?
Oh, I love that.
So that's what it is. And we would go on these when I worked on a recovery program. We went on these chase the vase challenges where we would take a vase out in the woods and hide it, and we gave them 21 uh, obstacles
Clues.
that they had to
Oh,
overcome to find the
or like
vase. Yeah.
a tough
Oh
mutter.
man,
Oh my God, I've done one of those. That is
we
brutal.
took them everywhere. We've done some crazy things. Yeah. So it was fun. I mean, that's just we make sobriety a lot different than other people, and
Uh-huh.
find what works for you. Find what
Yeah.
works. Attach onto it.
There is no one way for everyone.
I love your vibe. I know that you work with the women. I would
Hmm.
have no problem sending women. Let me.
Yay.
Does that make sense? Because
Oh
you
yeah.
have a good approach, and I like it, and that's what people need.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Thank you so much for saying that.
for sure.
Okay, well, I am super excited about your upcoming summit, and we will definitely. I'll leave links to all of this. So for people that are listening, I'll leave links to all these things on the website at odatchat.com so that you don't have to try to write all this down. I love the work that you're doing. Thank you for showing up for the people who are saving us, like on the regular. So I have a special place in my heart for people who are on the front lines of recovery, because I know how from experience how hard it is sometimes. So you're doing amazing work. Thank you for doing God's work, and I'll look forward to talking to you again.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Welcome.